The mansion was not just a home, it was a warning. Behind its carved doors, marble halls, and endless rooms stood the remains of a fortune that once seemed too large to disappear. A fortune built by one of the most ruthless and disciplined businessmen America had ever seen. Cornelius Vanderbilt started with almost nothing. Born in 1794 on Staten Island, he entered the world far from luxury. There were no grand ballrooms, no private rail cars, no family palaces, just hard work, sharp instincts, and an obsession with winning. By the time America was changing, Vanderbilt was already changing with it. He saw opportunity on the water first. Ferries, steamships, routes, passengers, freight. He understood that whoever controlled movement controlled money. Then came the railroads. And Cornelius Vanderbilt moved from ships to steel. He built power not by chasing attention, but by controlling the arteries of a growing nation. His railroads connected cities, moved goods, and helped shape the American economy. By the time he died in 1877, Vanderbilt had become one of the richest men in the world. But here is the strange part. Building the fortune was only the first battle. Keeping it would prove much harder. Cornelius Vanderbilt understood this. Near the end of his life, he made a decision that revealed how deeply he feared the weakness of inheritance. He left the overwhelming majority of his wealth to one son, William Henry Vanderbilt. It was not sentimental. It was strategic. Cornelius believed a great fortune could survive only if it stayed concentrated. Divide it too many times, and the empire would weaken. Give it to heirs who did not understand sacrifice, and it would disappear. For a while, his strategy worked. William Henry Vanderbilt was not the reckless heir people might have expected. He expanded the family fortune and became even richer than his father. Under him, the Vanderbilt name reached heights few American families could imagine. But William made a different choice. When he died in 1885, the fortune was divided more broadly among his children. And that is where the slow unraveling began. The next generation inherited not only money, but expectation. They were no longer builders fighting for survival. They were heirs born into victory. That difference changed everything. To the public, the Vanderbilts became American royalty. They hosted grand parties, married into elite circles, built mansions that looked less like homes and more like declarations of power. The family's wealth became visible everywhere. There was the Breakers in Newport, Marble House, Fifth Avenue mansions, vast estates, social events designed to force old society to accept new money. But every palace carried a hidden cost. A mansion does not simply sit quietly after it is built. It demands staff, maintenance, taxes, repairs, and constant spending. The larger the lifestyle, the larger the drain. And the Vanderbilts were not just spending money, they were spending momentum. The founder had built wealth through control, discipline, and business aggression. Some descendants inherited the money, but not the same hunger. They inherited the name, but not always the machinery that created the name. This is one of the greatest dangers of family wealth. The first generation builds. The second generation protects. The third generation performs. And performance is expensive. As the years passed, the Vanderbilt fortune became scattered across heirs, homes, marriages, lawsuits, and lifestyles. What had once been a concentrated empire became a collection of individual fortunes, each exposed to personal choices. Some heirs pursued society, some pursued horses, some pursued luxury, some pursued art, some pursued escape. And slowly, the fortune that once seemed impossible to destroy began to thin. But this was not simply a story of foolish spending. It was a story of identity. For the descendants, the Vanderbilt name came with a burden. They were expected to live like Vanderbilts, marry like Vanderbilts, entertain like Vanderbilts, and preserve a public image that had become almost impossible to afford. When a family becomes a symbol, the symbol can start consuming the family. That was the trap. The houses had to remain grand. The parties had to remain dazzling. The name had to remain powerful. But behind the image, the financial foundation was changing. Railroads were no longer the unstoppable empire they had once been. The economy evolved. Taxes rose. Estates became harder to maintain. The old model of wealth began to weaken. And as the fortune divided, the pressure multiplied. One of the most famous examples of Vanderbilt ambition was George Washington, Vanderbilt II, who built Biltmore in North Carolina. It was breathtaking, visionary, and enormous. But Biltmore also showed the tension at the heart of inherited wealth. It was beautiful. It was historic. It was costly. Over time, even the grandest estates had to adapt or collapse. Biltmore survived because later descendants turned it into a business, opening it to the public and preserving it through reinvention. That decision matters because it shows the difference between legacy as a monument and legacy as a living system. A monument only consumes. A system can renew itself. Many Vanderbilt properties did not survive in the same way. Some were demolished. Some were sold. Some became memories of a vanished age. By the mid-20th century, the Vanderbilt name still carried prestige, but the fortune no longer carried the same power. The family that once dominated American wealth had become a cautionary tale. Not because every descendant failed, but because the original empire had not been rebuilt with the same force that created it. That is the real lesson. Money is not legacy. Money is only fuel. Without discipline, it burns. Without purpose, it scatters. Without education, it weakens. Without unity, it divides. Without reinvention, it dies. The Vanderbilts had more than enough money to last forever. But forever is not purchased once. It must be managed every generation. And that is where many wealthy families lose the battle. They prepare heirs to inherit comfort, but not responsibility. They teach them how to live with wealth, but not how to protect it. They preserve the family name, but not always the family mission. Cornelius Vanderbilt built his empire with obsession. His descendants inherited a world where obsession was no longer required. That may sound like success, but it can also be the beginning of decline. Because comfort changes people. It softens urgency. It turns builders into beneficiaries. It replaces survival instincts with social expectations. And when wealth becomes normal, it stops feeling fragile. That is when danger begins. The Vanderbilt story is not just about railroads, mansions, or lost millions. It is about what happens when a fortune outlives the mindset that created it. It asks a question every wealthy family eventually faces. What are we actually passing down? Assets? Status? A surname? A lifestyle? Or the values that made the fortune possible? Because if the only inheritance is money, then the inheritance is already at risk. The Vanderbilts remind us that wealth does not disappear in one dramatic moment. It disappears through 1,000 quiet decisions. One oversized home, one divided estate, one careless heir, one expensive identity, One generation that assumes the river will never run dry. And then one day, the fortune that seemed permanent becomes history. Still, the story is not only tragic. Biltmore's survival proves that legacy can evolve. A family name can be rebuilt around stewardship instead of display. Wealth can move from private luxury to public value. A mansion can become more than a monument to spending. It can become a business, a museum, an employer, and a preserved piece of history. That is the deeper lesson. The families that survive are not always the richest. They are the ones that adapt. They create new builders inside the family. They teach heirs the cost of comfort. They turn wealth into responsibility before it turns into entitlement. Cornelius Vanderbilt once controlled the movement of a nation. But his family's greatest challenge came after the trains, after the ships, after the empire. The real test was not how to build wealth. It was how to keep meaning alive after wealth had already been built. And that is why the Vanderbilt name still matters, not just as a symbol of American riches, but as a warning that even the greatest fortune can fade when legacy becomes performance instead of purpose. The mansion still stands, but the question remains, was it proof of power, or evidence of how easily power can become a burden? For every family chasing wealth, the Vanderbilt story leaves one unforgettable truth. The money may build the empire, but only values can keep it standing.